What's up? Hii ni show ya mawowowo, the wowowo generation. Welcome back to our show. This is the JC Momentum Teens. Show yenye inakueducate, inakuimpact na bado inakufunza skills zenye hauko unajua. So, welcome to our show. And don't forget to subscribe. So, today, yani leo kuna show ingine moto sana. We have a powerful guest and also an interactive audience. So, today we are going to talk drugs and substance abuse. Hii ni kitu inasumbua vijana hapa nje. Na this is the show for you. Kama unajua msee mwenye ako into drugs na ana struggle, this is the show to watch. Send them the link, wakuje, invite them. So today our guest, yani huyu mtu ni msee mnoma sana. A student at St. Paul's University, Department of Social Sciences, Faculty of Psychology. In short, anasomea kuwa psychologist. A father of two from Nakuru town. His name is none other than Henry Kipchilis Cherop. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, today we want to talk about an issue that is affecting normal teens. Like, vijana hapa nje, hii issue inawasumbua sana. Inawasumbua. And from you, you have an experience. Maybe you can introduce yourself, sharing on the same.
Thank you very much. Thank you, audience. Thank you for having me here today. It's a beautiful church. And I want to thank God for my life today. A brief introduction. As you've heard, my name is Henry Kipchilis Cherop. I am 46 years old, a father of two, a last-born son. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm also a student at St. Paul's University. And I want to become a counselor when I grow up so that I help those who are out there who are bound by the chains of addiction. Thank you very much.
So, welcome, sir. So, we'll get straight to it. Drugs.
Yes.
Drugs and substance abuse.
Yes.
Briefly, you can tell us your story on how you became an addict.
So this is my story. I call it my testimony. Back in 1991, that's when I tasted my first sip of alcohol. I was 17 years old. I was in Form 3. My first cigarette was in 13. I was 13 years old when I took my first cigarette. Drank my first alcohol at 17. So for me, it has been a journey. I went to boarding school in class 1. Class 1, boarding school. So immediately after nursery school, I went straight to boarding school. And my counselors say that was one of the reasons why I got into what I got into later in life. So basically, I took my first cigarette at 13 years old. I took my first sip of alcohol at 17. Then after that, I went to university. And in my first year, when I was in Baraton University, I was introduced to my third drug, which is weed. And then after that, same year, when I was still my first year, I was introduced to the world of heroin. So that was my 4th drug. So basically, that has been my journey.
Whoa, yeah. Such a tender age, like, why? Why drugs? Why drugs at such a tender age? There are so many things that you can result to toxic behaviors, like you can get into gangs. Why drugs?
I got into drugs for 2 reasons. Low self-esteem and peer pressure. Those are the 2 main reasons. I got into drugs through friends because I was trying to fit in. I was trying to look for love out there. I was trying to look for recognition out there. Because as I told you, I went to boarding school in class 1. So basically, I was away from home. I didn't have that motherly love. I was away from my parents. And I think that is why I deviated towards these friends. And eventually, I wanted to belong to this group of people who were going to accept me. And the only way they were going to accept me is if I was going to do what they did best, and that was drugs.
Yes, and you know, I'm trying to reason out, like, at such a tender age, where did you get, like, who introduced you to these drugs?
So basically, this is what happened. In school, of course, there are students who will have drugs. I was raised in a Christian family. Nobody in my home did drugs completely. My elder brothers, my elder sisters, my parents never drank alcohol, never smoked. So these are vices that I was introduced to because I met these friends who were doing drugs in school at that tender age. So I would find a cigarette here and I would find maybe one or two issues here and there, and I would want to do it because I wanted to join them. Because without doing it, they would not accept you as their friend. Yes.
So how long did this go for?
So basically, I smoked most of my primary school life, cigarettes. Then I started drinking when I was in high school. That was in 1991. I was 17 years old. Then after that, I went to university and I started the other two drugs, which is weed and heroin. And I continued my life in drugs for 25 years. From 1991 to 2017.
Well, that's a really long time. And did your parents know that you were into drugs? Family members, the relatives, friends, your close friends? Did they know that you're into drugs?
At first, they didn't know that I was in drugs. But later in life, they started to realize what was happening. Of course, no parent would want to accept that this has happened to their child. But eventually, they have to admit that it is the truth. But for me, it started much later when I was kicked out of university and I had to finance my addiction. I didn't have a job and I had to buy heroin, I had to buy alcohol, I had to buy weed. So I had to devise ways of looking for money to finance my addiction, and this is how my family realized that this fellow is actually an addict.
So did you get into crime in order to finance your addictions, like buying those drugs? From what I know, heroin is a really expensive drug. So did you get into crime, or did you look for other sources of income in order for you to buy those drugs?
Thank you very much. That is a very good question. At first, I would borrow money from my parents. That is how it started. So I would borrow money from my parents, from my brothers, but eventually they realized what is going on and those avenues were stopped. So we had to look for other ways. Petty crime. So I started to steal stuff around home. Because as I told you, I was kicked out of university, so I was back at home. I was living with my parents. So I started stealing chicken, stealing maize, stealing milk from the dairy farm, stealing spare parts, vandalizing my dad's car and selling the parts. So basically, that is how I started looking for the money to finance my addiction. But later, I graduated now to stealing money, maybe from my mom's handbag, stealing cell phones from visitors. And that is how I started to become a petty thief to finance my addiction. And eventually, of course, we started to, in Swahili, tunasema kupiga ngeta. We started robbing people in the streets to get a shilling or two to buy heroin and get a fix.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I'm into this point that, yeah, you're into petty crime. Like, what made you transform to be the person that you are today? What was your turning point?
So in between all these 25 years, I became a father twice. I got a son and I got a daughter. And so many things happened in these 2.5 decades. So many things happened. There was a lot of violence at home. There was there was me going to jail, police stations. I was kicked out of home so many times. I was in and out of hospitals because I had so many issues with my health. And eventually, I lost all my buddies. I buried all my buddies, all my junkie mates. I call them my junkie mates, for various reasons, from suicide, HIV/AIDS, car accidents, overdoses, liver cirrhosis. So when these guys died, we're talking about 12 friends of mine, and I buried all of them. So eventually I was the only one remaining. And eventually I realized my time had come and I was going to die. And I started planning how I was going to kill myself. I started having suicidal ideation. But I never killed myself. But I planned for so many years. And eventually I realized that the reason why I didn't die is because God loved me. And He wanted to use me to reach out to the world, to reach out to the addicts out there and tell them that there is hope, that you can change, and that God loves all of us. And that is how I got treatment.
So, which source of, how, like, did you reach out to a rehabilitation center?
Yes, this is what happened. Eventually, my family had to come and look for me in the ditches because I was sleeping out there. I was living in the slums. I was a dirty guy. I was defeated. I was sick. I was confused. I was just walking around. But, I was walking dead. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know which year it was. I didn't know what day of the week it was. I was wearing the same set of clothes for weeks. I was not showering. So my brothers and my sisters looked for me, and they got me somewhere I didn't even know. And they talked to me. They told me about my kids. And there was some tough love also in the mix. Tough love. But eventually, I went to hospital and I went for detox for some time. Then I went to rehab for 1 year. 1 year. I went to a faith-based rehab, a church rehab. So I was in church for 1 year. Just me and the Bible and Jesus. And that is how I got saved. And that is how I got transformed. and the rest is history.
So, like, your children, did they come to accept when you changed? Did they come to that point that they said, Daddy has changed, now they accept you back and the love?
Very good question. When I was in rehab for 1 year, we were taught a lot of things. We were taught that when you forgive and you're forgiven, because that is the beginning of the healing process, we were taught that when you seek your children, you don't force them to forgive you, because you are the one who caused all these problems. So what you do is you ask for forgiveness, and then you wait. It might take a lifetime. They might not even accept you. That is not the issue. The issue is just to wait and see whether they will accept you as a father. So I got out of rehab in 2018, and I had to go and look for them. I had not seen them for years. So I talked to my in-laws. At first, they didn't want to talk to me, but eventually, my kids started to accept me pole, slowly, behind the scenes. So I'm taking care of them right now. Of course, but the law is there. You know, okay, the law is there, so there are issues that govern such issues, because these are minors and they have to be taken care of. So I'm educating them, and they call me Dad.
That's really nice. So as we go on a break, what will be your advice for that teenager out there whose parents, like, they can relate to your story? They're into drugs. What message can you pass to them?
Choices have consequences. That is what I can tell the youth out there. Look at me at 46. I am beginning my life afresh. When I got out of rehab, I decided to go back to school, because that is what kids do. When I got out of rehab, I didn't have anything to my name. I had sold everything I ever had in this world. So I decided to go back to school, then after that, get a job, look for money, and start building my life from zero. So to any youth who is starting right now, stop it. Choices have consequences.
Thank you. Stay tuned, our viewers, as you check out this amazing activity. We will back shortly.
Hello, saseni kwa majina ni Benedict Moirore. I'm 15 years old. Today I'm going to skate for Jesus and teach you some basic moves about skating. Ni kitu poa ya kufanya ukiwa on your free time, and yes, I love skating. Yeah, it's my hobby, my talent. Yeah. So kwa hii movie yangu next ni inaitwa Crazy, na inatumia miguu, stability yako ya mguu na flexibility, na nilijifunza tu when I was at home peke yangu, na yes. So in my next move itakuwa ni 180. So nitakuwa nikienda on a high ground, nikiruka to the lower ground.
Welcome back, guys. It has been an interactive topic on drugs and substance abuse. Kama bado hujashare link, tumia marafiki zako. They will get help from this topic. So, Mr. Henry,
Yes.
back to you.
Yes.
I've been wondering, like, you have been using drugs for 25 years.
Yes.
25 years is a really long time.
Long time.
So, ile part ya, how did it advance from using weed to using heroin?
So this is a story. I was in this party when I was in campus, first year. Then these friends invite me to their table, and there was this white powder on the table, and I didn't know what it was. I'd seen it in the movies, but I never knew that it would happen to me. So they asked me to try it, and of course, as I talked to you guys about peer pressure and that feeling of fitting in and being wanted, I tried it. I didn't know it was heroin at first, but I knew later, and that was the beginning of hell for me, because heroin, you actually get addicted to it immediately. You only need 1 or 2 shots, and that's it. So, and I sank to the bottom completely. So at first, we used to get it free of charge from the pushers. There is a guy who is in the streets who pushes on behalf of the drug person who is behind. And they give it to you. They give you 3 free so that you become hooked to it and you become a customer. So I became an addict. And at first I remember we used to inject our hands. Then after the veins in our hands collapsed, we would go to the necks because there is a jugular vein in the neck. Then after those ones disappeared, we would go to the ankles, in the feet. Then after some times, those ones disappeared. Then we went to the stomach lining. So we kept on looking for the veins because at some point they collapse. You have to look for the vein that takes the drug directly to the brain because it is expensive and you want the best feeling for, because it gives you that feeling that you've never had before. So eventually, when the stomach area had issues, we would go to the inner thighs. And we also had ladies in our whatever. We used to shoot together. And eventually, I remember when I was in Mombasa, when I was with the junkies down in Mombasa, we started injecting ourselves in the private parts because the private parts have a lot of blood vessels that give you that rush. And that was always the last alternative. So we are talking private parts for the ladies and the men. So it was terrible. We did so many things. I remember at some point we used to, because it was so expensive. A gram would go for around $10. So you couldn't waste it because you go and hustle. By hustle, I mean you go and rob people, and maybe you didn't get any money, and your buddy got money. So when he comes with his fix, he works it in the vial, and you have to share it, you and your friends. So you share the same shot. And sometimes what we would do something called Bluetoothing. Bluetoothing is when one guy injects himself, then you collect his blood, and then you inject the other guys. So you can imagine the danger that is in there. Hepatitis, HIV, AIDS. That is why I told you that I lost a lot of friends to AIDS. That is how they died. So there are so many diseases that people could get through that way. Yes.
And how long did you use heroin?
I used heroin for 10 years.
10 years.
Yes.
And did you experience some of the health complications that you've just mentioned?
Heroin destroys brain cells. Heroin leads to mental disorders like schizophrenia. You start losing reality. You start seeing your own things. You start to hallucinate. You lose clockwork. You don't know what is happening, and you start to become violent. You just lose it. So it is very dangerous, and it has a disease like schizophrenia has no treatment. So once you get it, you will be on drugs for the rest of your life. So it is very, very dangerous.
Thank you for that. And now this is the time that we offer our audience an opportunity to ask in their questions. I'll start with you, Gina.
Thank you very much. My name is Georgina Ann. I'm a Form 2 student at Nakuru Girls High School. And my question is, as you began using weed, did it lead to the urge of using other drugs?
Good question. In psychology circles, as I said, I'm studying psychology right now. People who use more than one drug are called poly-drug users. So I was using so many drugs at the same time. I was not using one drug, because in one sitting, I would use kubera, I would use tobacco, I would use alcohol, I would smoke a cigarette, I would do weed, and then I would shoot heroin. So I was doing a cocktail of drugs. So I think all of them were leading to each other, not one particular one. Yeah.
Yes, Shem.
Thank you very much. I am Shem Duo from Baricho High School, and I'm in Form 3.
Yes.
In those 25 years, did you have any hope that you will ever stop taking the drugs?
I always wanted to quit. Always. Every day. I would wake up every morning and I knew what was happening, because addicts know what is happening to them. They can see. They can see what is happening to them. They see the progress as they go down every other day. I wanted to quit, but I never knew how. I was afraid of getting out of that life, because that was the only life I knew for so many years. So I had some hope in me, but I didn't know how to do it. Yeah.
My name is Paul Karaoke from Giachuki High School.
Yes, Paul.
In Moranga. So my question was, in those years that you were taking drugs, well, what were the challenges that you had while you were trying to stop taking them?
Okay, I think the word you're looking for is withdrawals. Withdrawals, you see, addiction, if you want to understand addiction, you have to understand three words: withdrawals, denial, and tolerance. So, tolerance is you need to use more of the drug over the years to get the same effect. Withdrawal is the effect, both biological and physical, that you get after you stop the drug immediately. For myself, because I was a poly-drug user, I was using more than 4 drugs at the same time. I could not just quit before going to detox, because you can die. The withdrawals that heroin brings are deadly. Stomachache, chills, headaches, diarrhea, hallucinations. three types of hallucinations: the ones you hear, the ones you see, and the ones you feel on your skin. You start to scratch. And you start losing it. You become confused. And it can kill. So what happens is that before I went to rehab, I was taken for detox first. Then I went to rehab. Then it was managed slowly until I overcame the withdrawals, because I could not sleep. It's called the sleeping issue is called insomnia. So I could not sleep for so long because I was used to blackouts. You know, blackouts and sleeping are two different things. When you see somebody who has blacked out, that is not sleep. So that is how I overcame the withdrawals. But they were painful, but eventually I overcame after months.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. Unfortunately, time is not on our side, but tune in for our next show as we continue with this interactive segment. You can also send in your questions, and if you are facing the same problems, there's a contact number below your screen. You can send any question. You can call that number. There's a person at the end of the line waiting to talk to you. Thank you very much.